What happens when curiosity opens the door to ancient evil? For 2 centuries, a terrifying presence slept, waiting on a forgotten patch of earth, a forbidden island in Malaysia, shielded by a curse older than the trees themselves. Now, a group of unsuspecting friends is about to stumble upon this horror. They didn't know they were breaking a seal. They didn't know they were waking a demon. All they knew was that the fun was about to end, and the dying was about to begin. This is the harrowing Malaysian horror story named Pulau. Our terrifying narrative begins 2 centuries in the past, showing us a deserted, forbidden island. Here, a female spirit, a Fetni, was actively placing a destructive curse upon the land and every soul who inhabited that village. Suddenly, the scene shattered, and we transition to the present day. Meeting a young woman named Kat, she jolted awake, drenched in a cold sweat, her heart hammering against her ribs. She had been seeing these persistent, bizarre dreams, and she couldn't rationalize why these sinister visions continued to invade her sleep. Just then, her friend, Din, rushed into the room. Kat and Din were part of a larger group, a lively crew of friends buzzing with excitement for their upcoming adventure. They were headed for an exotic island holiday, a tropical getaway surrounded by dozens of smaller, scenic islands. Their spirits were high. While running errands, Din and Kat stopped at a local shop. Din, clearly smitten, pointed out a special, ornate bracelet. He explained the local legend. If a man presented this bracelet to the woman he loved and placed it on her wrist, they would be eternally united. Kat, perhaps too grounded for such fanciful notions, confessed she didn't believe in the superstition. But Din was ready to prove it. He decided he would place it on her right then, effectively demonstrating the proof and declaring his love. Din held deep, sincere feelings for Kat, however. Just as those crucial words were about to leave his lips, their friend Lily burst onto the scene. Din's confession was instantly derailed, and the words he yearned to say remained trapped inside. Kat, who was also known as Sithi, would remain oblivious to his true feelings for the time being. Lily had brought along her cousin, Ben, and soon the entire group, including Sithi. Din, Lily, Ben, and another girl named Yus boarded a boat helmed by a captain named Murtaza. They were thoroughly enjoying the journey and the beautiful scenery. We quickly discover that Lily was dedicated to documenting their entire trip, acting as a travel blogger. Their holiday bliss quickly evaporated upon their arrival at the resort. Yu spotted an unwelcome sight. Her stepsister and her social circle had arrived. Yu's was deeply unhappy. Her relationship with her stepsister was terrible, and this unexpected run-in immediately cast a shadow over her vacation. Lily, trying to lift the mood, handed out maps of the surrounding islands. Sithi stood slightly apart, examining a map, when Ben approached. They laughed easily together, sharing a playful exchange. Din watched them from a distance, a familiar ache of disappointment and jealousy rising in his chest. He was frustrated that he still hadn't found the right moment to tell Sithi how he truly felt. Later, while Sithi was settling her belongings in her room as Yus and Lily chatted, a sudden, chilling sound pierced the tranquility. Sithi froze. She heard a woman's voice crying out in genuine, searing pain. The voice was hysterically calling out to someone named Molly, claiming they were bound together forever. Sithi was deeply unnerved. Lily came to check on her, asking if she was having her usual weird moments. Sithi admitted that this was different, and something about the trip felt wrong. She quickly changed the subject, insisting Lily should ignore her worries and focus on the fun. As the others frolicked in the swimming pool, Din sat alone, staring intently at the bracelet. He had bought the magical trinket. Only his best friend, Dodd, knew the depth of his feelings for Sithi. Dodd pushed Din, urging him to speak up immediately before Ben could steal Sithi's attention, suggesting that Ben clearly liked her, too. Din was resolute, maintaining that Sithi would never choose Ben. Their conversation also revealed the romantic entanglement between Dodd and Yus. They were very close and shared mutual affection. Din, ever the protector, offered a serious warning to Dodd. He advised him not to pursue Yus lightly. If Dodd wasn't serious, Din feared he would get hurt, and Din couldn't stand to see his best friend suffer. Meanwhile, Ben and Mark sat on the sand. Ben was heavily smoking. Mark pointed out that Ben had already smoked a pile of cigarettes and questioned why he had even come on a fun trip if he was ungoing to enjoy himself. Ben confessed that he was trying to use the trip as an escape from a deep, unspoken sadness. That night, as the group enjoyed a festive barbecue, Sithi noticed something truly strange. Because Sithi possessed a unique and terrifying ability, the power to see spirits, ghosts, and the Jinshi, saw a woman's specter standing right next to Ben as he smoked. The ghost looked profoundly sad. Sithi couldn't take her eyes off the sorrowful spirit, which made Ben extremely uncomfortable. Misunderstanding her gaze, Ben assumed Sithi disapproved of his smoking and quickly stubbed out his cigarette. Remarkably, the spirit instantly looked pleased. Din, full of restless energy, wanted to join the dancing. But Sithi's attention was drawn to a thrilling fire dancer performing nearby. Din, seeing his chance, followed her. He resolved that this was the perfect moment to propose and finally tell Sithi how much he cared. But once again, fate, or perhaps just terrible timing, intervened. Sithi walked directly past him and went straight to stand beside Ben to watch the spectacular fire show. Din's proposal was thwarted, and he stood heartbroken, his feelings again locked away. The next morning, they set off with Murtaza to explore the other islands. Ben noticed a mysterious amulet hanging from Murtaza's neck and asked if they were heading anywhere particularly dangerous. Murtaza explained that it was an ancient amulet passed down through his ancestors. He admitted, however, that he had little faith in its protective power, believing only a higher power could truly shield them from harm. Yus's stepsister's group was, regrettably, still following them. Lily suddenly spotted a captivating, beautiful island in the distance, the very island we saw in the opening scene. She pleaded with Murtaza to take them there. Murtaza's response was immediate and firm. No, he warned them that it was a strictly forbidden island. Sithi stared intently at the island, feeling a strange pull as they proceeded toward their snorkeling destination. They dropped anchor and dove into the clear water. As they swam among the fish and marine life, Sithi somehow drifted away from the others. Suddenly, a horrifying object tumbled right in front of her, a human skull. Sithi looked around in utter terror and realized she was surrounded by scattered piles of human skeletons. Overwhelmed by the grim discovery, Sithi blacked out. Above the surface, the friends realized Sithi was missing. Without a second thought, Din plunged back into the water. Murtaza, panicking, quickly followed with his first mate. Din located the unconscious Sithi while trapped in her fear-induced state. Sithi experienced a chaotic swirl of visions, witnessing terrifying scenes related to ancient black magic rituals. Din managed to pull her to safety onto the boat. Murtaza was extremely worried by Sithi's state. He interpreted the event as a grave warning from the island itself. That night, he felt compelled to tell both groups the truth about the Forbidden Island. He recounted the tale of a curse laid 200 years prior by a woman. The curse was devastating, wiping out the entire village in a single night. Villagers disappeared, and their remains were never located. Sithi, shaken by the tale and recalling her own visions, asked what became of the woman who cast the curse. When the other group started making insensitive jokes about the serious warning, Murtaza sternly silenced them. He emphasized that Sithi's experience was a genuine sign of vital caution they must heed. Murtaza departed, leaving the two groups alone. His departure immediately sparked a volatile argument between Yuz and her stepsister. The petty conflict escalated, leading to a ridiculous wager. They would settle the dispute with a game. The losing team would be forced to spend one full night on the terrifying cursed island. The game began, building tension until it was Sithi's turn. Suddenly, mid-action Sithi entered a trance-like state, slipping into a horrifying vision of another world. She saw burning figures and people shouting desperately for her to escape. The sheer horror of the premonition caused her to freeze completely, and her team lost the challenge. Their fate was sealed, a night alone on the Forbidden Island. That night, Sithi's sleep was tormented by more bizarre and frightening dreams. The next morning, as they prepared for the trip, she spoke to Lily. She confessed that everything she had experienced, the dreams, the waking visions, the auditory scares, felt undeniably connected to the Forbidden Island. Lily was instantly worried, but Sithi quickly dismissed it, convincing her friend that she was probably just overthinking things. Din came over, full of concern, assuring Sithi that he had packed all her essentials and she shouldn't worry about anything. He tried, yet again, to confess his feelings, but before he could get a single word out, Ben called them over to the boat. Din was interrupted for the third time, his chance lost. As the boat approached the cursed land, a collective shiver of apprehension ran through the group. The island looked darkly menacing in the distance, shrouded by heavy, black clouds. It was as if the island itself was actively trying to push them away, issuing a silent, potent warning. But having lost the bet, they were forced to proceed. Two members of the winning team dropped them off. Mark, already nervous, anxiously told them to make sure they came back early the next morning. The other two laughed at his fear and sped away. Mark was beside himself with anxiety over the prospect of spending 24 hours isolated on this unsettling patch of land. His friends ribbed him for his fear, but soon they all sought relief in the water. They were still completely oblivious to the massive, ancient peril awaiting them in the interior. After their swim, they rested. Lily, never forgetting her blogging duties, began filming when she spotted a rare, unique, and unusual bird. Excitedly, she chased the bird into the dense jungle, and the others followed. Sithi and Ben cautiously urged her not to go too far, but the chase pulled them deep into the woods until they stumbled upon an intensely strange place. It was clearly the entrance to the village that vanished 200 years ago. Two imposing stone idols flanked the path, marking the way. The entrance was sealed by a simple rope. And here's where things went horribly wrong. Dodd, without a moment of consideration for the historical significance or potential danger, stepped forward and impulsively ripped the rope down. Sithi, Din, and Ben arrived only moments later, unable to stop him. Sithi hesitated, refusing to step inside. Ben reasoned with her, explaining that they had to stay together to survive the night. Now was not the time for arguments. Reluctantly, they walked into the abandoned village. They reached a 200-year-old wooden house. Upon its exterior, a strange script, likely a protective charm meant to ward off evil, was visible. Din boldly went up and flung the door open. Ben remarked that they should check out the building, noting that every house had the same protective marking. Sithi felt an intense sense of foreboding, a deep wrongness pervading the environment. She then noticed Dodd outside, carelessly scribbling something crude on one of the stone idols. Sithi rushed over, sharply rebuking him. She emphasized that this was an ancient, sacred, 200-year-old place, and they must show respect. Din immediately backed her up, and Dodd, chastened, stopped joking around. Din declared the house structurally sound, suggesting it was an ideal place to spend the night. It certainly beat camping unprotected near the ocean. Inside, they began dividing up the duties. However, only Sithi, Ben, and Lily were actually working. The others were simply relaxing. Lily complained, but Din casually suggested they had plenty of time. As he spoke, Din's eyes narrowed. Seeing Ben working diligently right beside Sithi, Din decided he needed to warn Ben immediately. He pulled Ben aside and told him, in no uncertain terms, to keep his distance from Sithi, because Din was in love with her. Ben offered no reply. At that moment, Sithi dropped an item, and Ben, without hesitation, rushed to her aid. Din realized Ben was not going to heed his warning. They set a perimeter fire outside and then went indoors to sleep. In the deep middle of the night, Ben awoke. He heard the distinctive creak of the wooden door swinging open on its own. He got up to check outside, feeling the sudden, oppressive silence. The atmosphere was thick and ominous. Finding nothing tangible, he secured the door, checked on his sleeping friends, and returned to his spot. A short time later, Sithi awoke. What she saw made her gasp. All her friends were sitting bolt upright, eyes glazed over, seemingly conscious but utterly unresponsive. It was an unnatural, terrifying sight. As she reached for Lily, Lily immediately collapsed back down, followed instantly by every friend, one by one. Sithi noticed another chilling detail. When Ben had checked on them earlier, they were sleeping curled and scattered. Now they were arranged in a perfectly rigid, straight line. This was profoundly wrong. Before we dive deeper into the darkness that Sithi uncovered, I need you guys to hit the like button if this chilling story has your spine tingling yet. And let me know in the comments if you would have stayed on that island or fled immediately. As Sithi sat terrified, she heard a muffled wailing from outside. It was the heartbreaking sound of someone crying intensely for a lost loved one. Sithi felt compelled to follow the sound. She reached a spot where, once again, she was violently pulled into a vision of the past. She witnessed the 200-year-old tragedy unfold. A woman desperately weeping over her partner's lifeless body. The villagers stood watching, offering no comfort. Instead, they roughly seized the grieving woman, quickly dug a hole, and buried the man's corpse right there. A village elder sternly warned everyone present that this event was to be a permanent secret. No one was ever to speak of it again. They used several stones to mark the freshly dug grave. Then, in a final act of cruelty, they set the couple's home ablaze. The woman, holding a small object, sat before the inferno, weeping. She cried out that their love story must be remembered for 1,000 years, and she cursed anyone who heard it to feel the same crushing pain she felt. The vision continued. Sithi watched the woman stumble into a mountain cave. There, she performed a savage, black magic ritual, calling down a terrifying curse upon the entire village. During the dark ceremony, she vowed that with every drop of blood she consumed, her curse would grow infinitely stronger, ensuring it remained on the land for eternity. She drank her own blood, completing the transformation, and emerged as the terrifying, powerful phantom. Sithi finally broke free from the vision, gasping as she woke. It was morning, and she realized the horrors of the previous night were confined to her dreams. The remaining friends gathered on the shore, fishing and attempting to relax. Mark was still anxiously trying to find cell service, though Lily had basically given up hope. Lily was flipping through her phone's gallery when Ben joined them. Suddenly, Lily gasped in shock. She had found a photo taken the night before. It showed all of them sleeping in those eerie, perfectly straight lines. The chilling question hung in the air. If they were all asleep, who on earth took the picture? Lily was completely confused. Sithi confessed that she had dreamed that exact scene. She quickly warned Lily and Ben to keep the photo a secret. She didn't want to panic the others, especially since they were supposed to leave soon, but they never left. The afternoon bled into evening, and the second team failed to appear. They realized they had been deliberately deceived and trapped. Without a boat, they were forced to face another night on the Forbidden Island. As dusk settled, Din insisted they return to the relative safety of the abandoned village house. Sithi, Ben, and Lily argued vehemently against it, haunted by the memory of the strange photo. However, unable to reveal the truth to Hughes and Mark without causing chaos, they were overruled. The majority forced them back toward the village. Meanwhile, Offland Hughes's stepsister and her group were reveling in their cruel prank, openly planning to keep the others stranded for one more day. Murtaza overheard their heartless scheme. He was furious that they had so carelessly ignored his warning and turned this dangerous situation into a joke. Since it was already dark, he couldn't reach them by boat. Instead, he sent a frantic voice message. He urged them to avoid any abandoned village in the jungle. If they entered, they would fall under the ancient, deadly curse of the phantom. But tragically, Lily and the others were still without any network reception. Completely ignorant of Murtaza's desperate warning, they walked right back into the cursed village. Upon entering the house, they were stunned. Despite cleaning the place thoroughly the day before, it was covered in filth again. They began cleaning once more. Dodd helped Hughes get comfortable. He whispered a romantic plan. After everyone was asleep, they would sneak out into the jungle to search for fireflies. Hughes happily agreed. Later, after everyone else was asleep, Dodd and Hughes slipped out. They walked through the jungle until they reached a clearing, the spot marked by the stones. This was the exact burial site from 200 years prior. They shared a tender moment. Their moment of youthful affection, however, served only to reawaken the sleeping curse. As they moved, Dodd accidentally dislodged the marker stones. This reckless act instantly unleashed the phantom, who took on a monstrous form. Sithi, sleeping inside, immediately sensed the terrifying energy release. She woke up, finding the room empty. Again, she was thrust back 200 years. She saw villagers holding flaming torches, preparing to attack. The cursed woman, now truly monstrous, screamed that they would all pay for their atrocities. She attacked them with strange, unearthly powers, slaughtering the villagers one after another. Horrified, Sithi stumbled back inside, colliding violently with Ben. She snapped back to the present. Ben, concerned, asked what was happening, and Sithi began trying to explain the horrors she had just witnessed. Meanwhile, outside Dodd, in a final act of utter disrespect, began to relieve himself on the very stones he had just disturbed. The consequences were instantaneous and brutal. As Dodd told Use they should head back, the terrifying, invisible force grabbed him and violently dragged him into the jungle. Use watched in paralyzed disbelief. Ben, needing clarity, pressed Sithi on how she knew all these things. Sithi finally revealed her deepest secret, her special gift of seeing and communicating with the dead. She referenced the night of the barbecue, describing the gentle woman she saw standing beside him, a woman with a distinct mole on her face. Ben, shocked, pulled out a photo of his mother, who had passed away 2 years ago. Sithi confirmed that was the spirit she saw. Ben struggled fiercely to reconcile Sithi's account with reality. Use burst in, screaming that Dodd had been snatched by something unseen. Din was absolutely shattered. Dodd was not just a friend, he was like a brother. Din immediately commanded everyone to search, suggesting they split up to cover ground faster. An hour of fruitless searching passed. They regrouped, exhausted. Ben insisted they needed to return. He warned Din that separating them would only lead to more danger. Din refused to leave without Dodd. Sithi stepped in, siding with Ben, reasoning that the jungle was too unsafe for them to risk everyone's life for one person. Reluctantly, Din agreed, and they started back toward the house. As the friends retreated, we see Dodd's terrible fate. He was held captive in the dark cave where the black magic ritual was performed centuries ago. The phantom attacked, slicing his throat. She then began drinking his blood. After 200 years, the taste of blood surged through her, and the phantom felt her terrifying power begin to fully regenerate. Din, haunted by the loss of his brother, was unable to sleep a wink. The moment dawn broke, he was ready to start searching again. He still pushed for them to split up to maximize their coverage. Ben strongly argued against splitting, repeating that their survival depended on staying together. Sithi again agreed with Ben, and Din was forced to accept the safer strategy. Mark, utterly terrified, offered to stay behind at the house to alert Dodd if he miraculously returned. The group set off together. Simultaneously, Murtaza launched his boat. He had dragged Use's stepsister's team along, insisting they needed to witness the true danger their thoughtless prank had created. As Sithi and the others searched frantically through the jungle, Murtaza's rescue attempt hit a wall. His boat suddenly stalled in the open ocean, belching thick, ominous black smoke from the engine. Murtaza realized the evil entity was actively trying to keep him away from the island. He frantically began reciting ancient prayers and incantations passed down from his ancestors. The smoking stopped, and the engine slowly came back to life. Meanwhile, a torrential downpour began in the jungle. Mark sat alone in the house. Suddenly, a girl named Kitty appeared. Kitty was one of the stepsisters group, and Mark had previously expressed interest in her. The continuous search in the heavy rain began to take a toll. The rest of the group was growing sick. Ben and the others urged Din to find shelter. Din, still focused only on Dodd, resisted until Ben demonstrated that they were walking in endless circles. Ben showed Din the piece of string he had tied to a tree, confirming they had returned to the exact starting point. Din finally gave up the search for the moment and agreed to return to Mark. Mark was still inside the house with Kitty. In a flash of true horror, the phantom dropped her disguise. She revealed her terrifying true form and attacked Mark Sithi, and the group rushed back to the house moments later. They found Mark's belongings, but Mark was gone. The only thing remaining was a pool of blood. The reality of their desperate situation finally hit them. Ben, now desperate, insisted they waste no time. They had to reach the shore immediately. If help arrived, they needed to be ready for extraction. Din, still in denial, was persuaded that perhaps Mark and Dodd had somehow made it to the ocean. At the shore, their hearts sank. There was no boat and no sign of Mark or Dodd. Din erupted in frustrated rage. Ben told Sithi that the time for secrecy was over. They had to show the others the photo and tell them everything Sithi had experienced so they could understand the true gravity of their peril. Lily showed the gruesome photo to Hughes and Din. Sithi shared her full, horrifying account. Suddenly, Din's phone managed to catch a single moment of network reception. Murtaz's frantic message flooded in. The message detailed the history. When the curse first descended 200 years ago, a shaman was brought in. The shaman sacrificed his own life to create a barrier, saving the last remaining villagers. He crafted the 2 amulet statues, bound them with a rope, and performed a ritual that sealed the phantom within the village perimeter. They realized, with sickening horror, that by untying that rope, they had unwittingly broken the shaman's shield and unleashed the ancient evil. They were overcome with dread. Then, a flicker of salvation appeared. Murtaz's boat sped toward them. They were elated, but the joy was instantly annihilated. Right in front of their eyes, the boat began issuing black smoke and violently exploded. Everyone aboard Murtaza and Hughes's stepsister's entire team was killed instantly. There was no one left to save them. No one even knew they were stranded on the cursed island. They were truly, desperately alone. Sithi, somehow remaining focused, concluded that the only potential path to survival lay back inside the village. Hughes was emotionally broken, but Lily, who had complete faith in Sithi, agreed to go. Din also accepted. The 5 remaining friends turned back toward the village. Their first act was remediation. They retied the rope across the stone idols. They sincerely apologized for their disrespect and wiped away the crude markings Dodd had scribbled on the statues. Next, they sought the spot where Dodd was dragged away. Sithi remembered her dream of the burial site. She needed to dig. As Sithi touched the stones, a gust of wind howled around them. Ignoring the warning, they dug into the earth, eventually finding a human skeleton. Sithi touched the remains. The contact triggered another overwhelming vision, a full, detailed account of the 200-year-old events. Molly, heavily pregnant, lived in the village with her adoring husband. Her husband cherished her. One night, villagers stormed their home. They accused her husband of being an outsider, a man of a different religion. Molly pleaded, explaining that she had converted to his faith, but the villagers refused to listen. They brutally murdered Molly's husband that night and buried him quickly. Sithi snapped back to the present. She now understood the full scope of the tragedy. Sithi explained that the phantom's strange photo had been their first chance, their first warning. Had they fled that morning, they might have been saved, but now they were deeply entrenched in the curse. To survive, they had to break the curse. Ben suggested that the answer to breaking it could only be found at the source, the cave where the black magic was performed. Din agreed. Sithi led them toward the mountain cave. Before leaving the village entrance, Din cautiously took one of the shaman's ritual artifacts, As they moved through the jungle, they caught glimpses of the phantom stalking them, hiding behind trees. However, their unity seemed to deter a direct attack. When Ben briefly went off alone to fetch water, he saw the phantom's distorted face reflected in the water. He immediately bolted back to the group. Sithi confirmed that the phantom was actively hunting them. They reached a flowing waterfall they needed to cross. Ben bravely stepped into the water first to secure the passage. Din crossed next, followed by the others. Lily was the last to cross. The phantom was waiting, submerged beneath the churning water. Lily handed her bag to Ben. In a terrifying blur, the phantom surfaced right in front of Lily, then abruptly lunged for Ben, grabbing his throat under the water. Ben plunged the shaman's ritual artifact deep into the phantom. The creature shrieked and recoiled, only to reappear instantly behind Lily. In the blink of an eye, the phantom dragged Lily down into the deep, dark water. Ben and Din searched frantically, but Lily was gone forever. Sithi was heartbroken, overwhelmed by the loss of her best friend. Now they had seen their enemy. Din looked down and realized the special bracelet had fallen from his pocket onto a rock near the water. It then tumbled into the water. They felt all hope draining away. Sithi, miraculously, maintained a sliver of faith. She argued that because they hadn't maliciously harmed the phantom, if they broke the curse, she believed the phantom might return their lost friends. Her stubborn conviction reignited a small spark of hope in the three survivors. As night fell, they stopped to rest, lighting a fire. Ben insisted on taking the first watch. Din, tired and defeated, went to sleep. He saw Sithi sitting next to Ben, but he no longer had the heart to interfere. Ben and Sithi shared a profound, emotional conversation. Ben talked about his mother and the grief he carried, and Sithi shared her deep pain over losing Lily. Suddenly, a strange noise echoed from the darkness of the jungle. Sithi warned Ben against investigating, but he cautiously moved toward the sound. He found his own mother standing before him, her ghost. The spirit claimed that Ben's new spiritual sensitivity, caused by the island, allowed him to see her. She pointed to the artifact he held, saying it prevented her from touching him, and pleaded for one last, single embrace. Sithi arrived, urgently shouting a warning. The entity before him was not his mother. Torn between love and logic, Ben raised the artifact toward the spirit. The moment he did, the phantom vanished, had been impersonating his mother. If you're still with us through this nightmare, hit the subscribe button now, because the stakes are impossibly high, and we are racing toward the final, terrifying showdown. While Sithi and Ben were distracted outside, the phantom seized its perfect opportunity. It swooped down on the sleeping youth. Din woke to Yu's frantic screams. Ben and Sithi rushed back. A blanket covered the struggling youth. Din snatched the fabric away, just as the phantom grabbed Yus and flew away into the darkness. They could only stand helpless and watch as their friend vanished. They were now down to 3, Din, Sithi, and Ben. The immense stress finally broke them, and Din and Ben erupted in a vicious argument, blaming each other for everything. Sithi had to scream to make them stop. She pointed out that they had already reached the entrance of the cave. As Sithi prepared to enter, Din pulled Ben aside. In a moment of selfless clarity, Din told Ben that regardless of what happened inside, Ben must forget about him and focus only on protecting Sithi and ensuring her escape. Din confessed that he couldn't bear the thought of Sithi being harmed. Ben, aware of Din's genuine love, simply nodded and followed. They raced into the cave. Inside, Yus had just regained consciousness, only to be instantly slain by the phantom. Sithi, Din, and Ben burst into the cavern, coming face to face with the terrifying entity. Ben and Din immediately engaged the phantom, fighting desperately with their weapons. In the chaos, Sithi heard a faint voice, Molly's husband. She realized the sounds of confinement and affection were emanating from a small box within the cave. Sithi approached the box. She opened it and found a small doll inside. This doll was the gift Molly's husband had made for her when he learned she was pregnant. Touching the doll sent Molly's spirit into a blind, murderous rage. She abandoned Din and Ben and lunged straight for Sithi. Sithi scrambled toward the exit, clutching the doll, but the phantom caught her before she could escape. Din desperately grabbed the phantom, struggling to hold her back. Ben stabbed the phantom with the enchanted ritual weapon. Din screamed at Sithi, urging her repeatedly to run. Sithi hesitated, unable to abandon her two friends. But the phantom ended the hesitation brutally. She killed Din right in front of Sithi's eyes. Witnessing his sacrifice, Sithi knew she had no choice but to flee. She ran, remembering Din and Ben's desperate instruction to escape at all costs. The phantom then turned and killed Ben. Both Din and Ben were dead. Sithi ran until she reached a small, crumbling house, Molly's former home. As she entered, the structure transformed into a living memory. Sithi saw the beautiful past, the moment Molly's husband gifted her the doll, promising that their family of 3 would never be separated. She watched the tender scene, tears streaming down her face. She stepped outside, and the vision ended. The phantom, Molly's spirit, attacked, grabbing Sithi by the throat, ready to snap her neck. Sithi fought to speak, forcing out the name, Molly. She then began reciting the loving phrases Molly's husband always used. The phantom's murderous rage instantly subsided. Sithi challenged her. "The villagers killed your husband," she said. "But why didn't you live for your child? Where is your baby?" The truth was revealed in one final, horrific flash of the past. On the night they killed her husband, the villagers had forced Molly to drink something. The substance caused her to miscarry. As her husband's body was dragged away and her house burned, her child was expelled, stillborn. Sithi finally understood the unfathomable depth of Molly's pain. The villagers had stolen her entire world, her husband, her child, and her home all in a single night. Weeping in the present, Sithi asked Molly why she had killed her friends. What was their fault? She questioned why Molly was still consumed by 200 years of burning hatred. Sithi argued that by clinging to her vengeance, Molly was trapping the souls of her own husband and child on this cursed land. It was time, Sithi insisted, for Molly to release the hate and free their spirits, allowing them to finally find the peace they were denied in life. Molly began to weep. She violently pushed Sithi into the water. Molly picked up the tiny doll. Crying, she began to recite the curse she had uttered 200 years ago, but she recited it in reverse. The island was freed from her terrible enchantment. After 2 centuries, Molly's tormented soul was finally granted release. Sithi was sinking deep beneath the water. Then, reality began to warp. Time rushed backward, reversing the tragedy. The timeline stopped precisely on the day Sithi had first passed out underwater. Din grabbed her hand and pulled her onto the boat. Sithi woke up, seeing all her friends, Lily, Din, Ben, Yus, Dodd, and Mark alive. She was flooded with relief and understood everything. Molly had reversed the curse, sending time back to before the tragedy began. Stin sat beside her and offered the bracelet. Sithi knew this was his proposal. She took the bracelet, placing it safely in her bag, and asked Din to wait. She needed time. She was still confused. She walked over to Ben. Sithi realized that deep down she harbored feelings for Ben, and she needed to sort out her heart before giving Din a definitive answer. In the final, beautiful scene, we see Molly. Her soul had reached the afterlife. She was standing on a tranquil shore and saw her beloved husband waiting for her. They were finally reunited, ready to begin the eternal life they were so tragically denied. And with that profound moment of peace, the terrifying chapter of Pulau comes to an end. We hope you enjoyed this deep dive into this heartbreaking and chilling Malaysian story. If you stuck with us until the very end, we are thrilled. Please comment below and tell us which character you think Sithi should end up with. And don't forget to subscribe for more detailed story explanations.